I call to order the September 28th, 2022 Area Board of Zoning Appeals of Tippecanoe County meeting. First item on the agenda is the approval of the previous meeting minutes.
Or the roll
Or actually,
call.
the roll call, please. Sorry, Derek.
No problem. Steve Clevenger.
Present.
Gary Schroeder.
Present.
Tom Andrew. Robert Novak.
Present.
Michelle Dennis.
Present.
Dustin Grove. Quorum present. Ed Butts. Quorum present.
Thank you. Now, the next item is the approval of the last meeting minutes.
I move to approve the minutes from the August 24th,
This conference
2022.
this conference is no longer being recorded.
I move to approve the minutes from the August 24th, 2022 BZA public hearing as submitted.
This conference will now be recorded.
We have a motion and a second. Any comments or corrections? Hearing none, all in favor of approving the August 24th, 2022 minutes, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Meeting minutes are approved as submitted. New business? None? Okay. I would like to go ahead and explain the procedures for today's meeting. Each case will be heard following a motion and a second from the board. We'll ask the staff to report on its findings. Following the staff report, we'll ask the petitioner to present his or her case, after which anyone wishing to support the petitioner's request for a variance or special exception will be asked to come forward. After hearing from the petitioner and those speaking on his or her behalf, we will ask those speaking against the petition to present their arguments. The petitioner will then be allowed to rebut arguments raised by those in opposition to his or her petition. Following the rebuttal, the board may wish to ask questions of the petitioner, supporters, and opponents of the petition, or of the staff. The staff will have the opportunity at this time to make any necessary clarifying comments. We will then vote by use of a prescribed ballot. 4 votes are necessary to make any decision. In the absence of 4 votes, either for or against, the petition is automatically continued to the next meeting, and we currently have 4 members present. Please observe the following guidelines for the sake of time and fairness to all. State your name and address for the record before you speak. Limit your remarks to 5 minutes or less. Do not repeat arguments that have been brought up by others. Remember that all visual aids used to support your arguments will remain the property of the board. Cell phones must be turned off while the meeting is in session. Please step out of the room before using your cell phone. And do we have a sign-in sheet as well? If we have speakers that are not the petitioner, to please go over to the staff desk and sign up after you speak, please. With that in mind, I'll take the public hearing motion.
I move that there be incorporated into the public hearing portion of each application be heard this evening and to become part of the evidence at such hearing, the Unified Zoning Ordinance, the Unified Subdivision Ordinance, the Comprehensive Plan, the bylaws of the Area Board of Zoning Appeals, the application and all documents filed therewith, the staff report and recommendation on the applications to be heard this evening, and responses from checkpoint agencies.
A second.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. And we'll hear our first case, please.
I move to hear and vote on BZA 2088, Purdue Research Foundation. Petitioners requesting a variance to allow 116 total parking spaces, 110 spaces plus 6 ADA spaces, instead of the required 180 parking spaces, or 64.44% of the total required, to allow for a proposed Rolls-Royce office space lab addition on a 21.37 acre property located at 1801 Newman Road, West Lafayette, Wabash 24 Southwest 23-5.
Have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Mr. Hiddle.
Okay, I think that's good. David Hiddle, Area Plan Commission. Your first case tonight, it is a 21-acre site, as outlined in yellow on the map in front of you. It is zoned OR for office research in the Purdue Discovery Park area. The petitioner is the Purdue Research Foundation, and this involves the building. Larry, our screens are off up front. This is the Rolls-Royce building. Petitioner is contemplating an expansion of the building inward into the site, which would be on part of the existing parking lot. One more? One more? Is it on? Can you guys see? Okay. What you see in blue is the existing Rolls-Royce building. The yellow is the proposed expansion area. And as you can see, they're going to lose a few parking spaces in doing that and increase the overall building area, which would trigger a need for more parking. The office building, or the building to date, has more or less been an office building, and with the expansion, it's going to convert into an office/research facility, which is going to lower their parking requirements. I think the big thing to point out here is that we're in the midst of, we have a committee looking at overhauling our parking requirements so that we're a little bit less in the business of telling people how much parking they need and more in the business of letting them tell us that. In this case, the petitioner has indicated that the existing parking configuration will give them more than they need, even though it's less than the zoning ordinance requires. Ordinance would require for the proposed expansion 180 spaces, and they are proposing 116 parking spaces. Again, the ordinance is driven by building square footage rather than actual number of employees in a given building. So that's in part what accounts for the exorbitant parking requirement. That and combined with this particular user's switch to a more a workforce that's not necessarily on site all the time and not on site all at the same time, I think it makes us perfectly comfortable with granting this variance. Again, it would be a variance for 116 parking spaces, whereas 180 would be required. We think it does meet the findings and are in support of it. We'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. Petitioner, his or her representative. This is not the one for the issue. It's the next case for the issue.
No, it's this case, actually.
Do we, it was brought to my attention that we do have that we did have an issue with the proofs of publication. Is there any action that we need to take? I'll let our attorney speak on that. Eric?
Apparently, the publication did occur, and I believe staff has received a copy of the publication. Is that correct?
That's correct.
So the important thing is that the publication occurred. The state statute and our own bylaws require that there be a proof of publication, which is a little bit of an antiquated notion, but it is nonetheless exactly what it sounds like. It proves they had the publication. And so instead of having this delayed, it doesn't make any sense to me, as long as the petitioner understands that now that you've showed that it was published, which is the important thing, that we can move forward without a proof, and that the petitioner will follow up with that proof later. And if it came to pass that they could not provide the proof of publication, then what we do would not be an effective action. And I'm comfortable with that. This is not unusual these days. Newspapers are having a harder time keeping up with getting these things produced. So I think it would probably make sense, Mr. Chairman, if you would ask for a motion approving the procedure I just outlined, that we will proceed and that the petitioner will provide a proof of publication after this meeting. Without that, the action we take tonight will not be effective. So if that could be put in the form of so moved, I think we'd be ready to consider it.
Would it make sense to make that a condition of the approval, that proof of publication
You
be
can.
provided, or
Sure.
just leave it? I mean, that
I think
makes
you
it
can make
pretty
it a condition after the fact. That's correct.
hard. Okay, so I would move that we hear the case without the proof of publication, but that be a condition of the approval after the fact that the proof of publication is provided, and we go ahead and hear the case this evening.
We have a motion. Do we have a second? Any comments? And it seems reasonable to me. So all in favor? Aye. Opposed? That motion carries. So we have a condition attached to the motion and the approval. And I'll go ahead and let you speak. As a
Paul
petitioner.
Burkott, 7643 US 231 South, Senior Project Manager for Purdue Research Foundation. I want to thank the board for its time in this matter. We agree, obviously, with the staff report, and I'm happy to also take any questions that you might have on this variance.
Thank you. We might have some.
Okay.
Anyone else wishing to speak in favor of the petition? Anyone in opposition to the petition? Comments, questions from the board?
Mr. Chairman,
Yes.
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with the actual site and the topography. Is there something preventing expansion of the parking lot on the site as presented?
Petitioner would like to address that.
Yes, to the south, there is Todd's Creek, which is a waterway of the U.S., which cannot be infringed upon. And then also to the west, there is a dry detention basin, which we need for, obviously, detention and that kind of stuff for stormwater runoff. And then 231 and then Newman Road, so.
From the information that was provided, there's the potential of an auxiliary lot to the north, is that correct?
Correct, yes.
How would it be safety-wise for people crossing that street, Newman Road? Is that heavily traveled? Is there a marked crosswalk?
There's not a marked crosswalk there before, or currently. In the past, we have used that as overflow parking. We had an agreement with Purdue University when they were in this building beforehand, and so we would carry that agreement over to Rolls-Royce as they become the single occupancy. With Rolls-Royce's use of that building, that would be infrequent, that they would require that overflow parking, and I'm sure that as part of a safety concern, if they were having an event or something along that lines, they would address that, and PRF would look into that as well. As far as a safety concern, whether we would need additional flag people or, patrolmen, something along that line for those infrequent uses.
Mr. Hiddle had brought up about the workspace or workplaces changing and a lot of people working from home. Do you have an idea of what the approximate, and Mr. Hiddle had said, versus going off of square feet versus how many people are going to be working there? Do we have an idea, once the addition gets done, how many people would be working physically at the location, or?
Yes, talking to Rolls-Royce, if everyone showed up and guests and that type of thing, they would need 100 parking spaces total on any given day. Their normal workflow is obviously much less than that, and especially with the research areas that they use, the type of testing that they do in those areas, there's not 30 people huddled around taking a look at something. There's, maybe 4 or 5 people that are running a test in a large testing area at any given time, so.
If you would lose the auxiliary lot, is there the possibility of street parking there, or? I'm
No.
just trying to think of safety factors for employees.
Yeah, if the auxiliary lot would go away, there is not an option for permanent street parking there. I mean, I'm sure anything can be arranged, but no, there would not be parking spaces along that section of Newman Road.
Thank you.
My guess is that they would have to, if they had a special event that required more, they would have to come up with some alternative where they'd have to bus people or.
Any other questions? Thank you.
Yep, thank you. Hearing no other questions, we have a ballot.
All right, I have 4 ballots cast. All 4 are in favor of granting the variance.
Variance has been granted, and we'll hear the next case, please.
I move to hear and vote on BZA 2089, James D. Hall, P.S., Vestern Associates Incorporated. Petitioners requesting a variance to reduce the front setback to 24 feet from the minimum required 60 feet from Sagamore Parkway for the construction of an ATM on property located at 3457 Bethel Drive, West Lafayette, Wabash 2 Southwest, 23-5.
Second.
Have a motion and a second, and we'll hear from staff. Mr. Hiddle, please.
Thank you. David Hiddle, Area Plan Commission. This property is at the southeast corner of US 52 in Bethel. It is a small commercial strip center with assortment of commercial retail and goods tenants. It is improved, as you see in the photo here. It is zoned GB for general business, and the request is to allow for erection of a freestanding ATM machine at the northwest corner of the property, between the drive area and an existing pole sign. It's kind of an unusual circumstance in that you don't see a lot of these. The ordinance doesn't really contemplate them. It requires a 60-foot front setback of any structure, and it includes even uninhabitable, unoccupied structures like an ATM, a freestanding ATM. It makes them beholden to that requirement. It exempts signs specifically, but no other particular structure other than signs. So this ATM would be required to provide a 60-foot front setback without this variance. Our thought is that, it's going to have a footprint not much different than a sign, about the same as this table, and to allow for more efficient use of space. There's no reason that this variance shouldn't be granted. We reasoned that it would probably have the same impact and function similarly to an air pump at a gas station, where it wouldn't attract a line or a queue, but would serve one person at a time more than likely. And the fact that ATMs are less and less being used by the public lessens any concerns that we may have had. We think that the existing maneuverability area will serve it as it's proposed to be built, and are supportive of the request as it stands, and would answer any questions you might have.
Petitioner or petitioner's representative?
Good evening, I'm James Hall, with Vester & Associates, professional land surveyor and project manager for the company. We are located at 309 Columbia Street, Suite 101 here in Lafayette, 47901. What we've brought before you today is a simple, we think, situation for an accessory structure for the benefit of our client, First Merchants Bank. This is the only logical location for the particular unit on this lot due to parking lot configuration and traffic flows. We agree with the comments by staff and the report and ask for your approval for this variance. Should you have any questions, we are available. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone wishing to speak in favor of the petition? Anyone in opposition? Questions, comments from the board? I do have one. How does this affect the current parking? I mean, the reduction in spaces?
There's no reduction in space in this particular scenario. On the photograph in front of you, you see that white truck in the corner next to the pole sign.
Correct.
That's part of the drive lane for regular travel, and the ATM sign would be on the left side or the highway side towards the corner, out of the paved area in the grass right behind the curb. So there'd be no practical effect other than maybe somebody waiting a few seconds while a transaction occurs to maneuver safely out of the parking lot.
So if you did have a queue of, 2 cars or something, it might block a couple of parking spots temporarily.
At most, is what we'd see happening in this situation.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Any other comments or questions? If not, we have a ballot.
4 ballots cast, all 4 in favor of the variance.
Variance has been granted. Administrative matters.
There are none?
I would like to say it's my understanding that we have a new member who's not present, that Dustin Grove's taking Jen's place on the board for the county commissioners. We'll welcome him when he shows up. If there are no other matters, I'll take the last motion. Oh, whoop, I've got one more thing, sorry. Unless any member has an objection, the chair will order the findings of each member casting a vote for the majority decision of the board to be the collective findings of the board in support of the decision of the board. Hearing none, it is so ordered, and now I'll take the last motion.
I move to adjourn.
We are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.